So there's always lots of trouble in life, right? We've had lots of trouble today, like setting up things at church. So many things have gone wrong. But that's kind of a minor problem, right? But there's a lot more serious things that go wrong in our lives, right? We're always facing problems, money problems, health problems, people problems. Just there's all kinds of troubles going on in life. And today, we're going to see what we can learn from Jesus' life about dealing with troubles. Right? This is not the only thing that the Bible says about dealing with life's troubles, but this is a very important story about something that happened with Jesus on a boat when he was with the disciples. And it will help us to learn about dealing with the troubles we go through in life and how to actually use our faith in those troubles, because I think it's a big problem in Christianity. Certainly in Protestantism, there's a big problem with not knowing about how to use your faith in troubles. In fact, I just heard the other day of someone who is going through a very serious health problem, and they've said, it's quite a well-known Christian, and they've said basically, we haven't got support from Christians. If anything, we've got a hard time from Christians. And when I heard that, I felt very sad for them, but I also thought, well, that makes sense, because in the church, we struggle with how to face life's troubles and how to apply our faith when we're going through life's troubles and how to help other people go through life's troubles and how to use their faith in those troubles. So that's what we're going to look at today, but first let me pray. Oh, Lord God, we've had so many setbacks this morning trying to get to this point here. I pray that you would pour your grace upon us. Help me to teach your word accurately in a way that glorifies you. Help us all to be attentive to your word right now. And teach us, Lord, how to use our faith through troubles. Amen. Okay, so please turn to the Gospel of Mark. So we turn to Mark chapter 4 and verse 35. So we've been working our way through stories in the Bible. And we've got to this point where Jesus is now on the scene. He's going around, he's got a bunch of disciples who follow him, and everywhere he goes, a ton of people start following him and start listening to him, and he starts preaching and he starts healing with people. And in Mark 4, verse 35, it says, "That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, 'Let us go over to the other side.'" So they're at a bit of land here, and he's saying, let's get a boat and go over the water to the other side, right? Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. So they've gone off in a boat, right? And then look what it says. It says, a furious squall came up and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Okay, so what is a squall, anyone? A windstorm. Yeah, so it's a storm, right? It's a storm, right? And the storm is so bad that what's happening with the water? You're getting these massive waves that are actually going over the boat. Okay, now who here has been on a boat in the sea? Anyone? Right, okay. Sometimes you look over the side and you see all the water and you think, whoa, that's kind of scary, right? But you're in the boat, everything's cool. But imagine that water's actually coming over the top of the boat. That would be proper scary, right? Proper scary, okay? I remember a time where it wasn't the same as this, but I took my family to a tidal island in Wales, and we got stranded, and we had to call the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard came in one of their rescue lifeboat things, and the water was so bad that the boat was basically like coming in towards us, and then the waves would get so bad they'd had to quickly pull back. And then they go out, and in the end, it was like I was holding my daughter Jada, and I had her like this, and they were basically, throw her. So basically, the lifeboat would come right up as close as it could to the rocks with all the waves, and I'm standing a few meters over here, and I'm just about to throw her, and then they're like, no, she hasn't got a life jacket. And then they throw me a life jacket, I put it on her, and then they're trying to get the timing right, and I'm like, do I throw her? And in the end, they're like, go! And I just chuck her in the boat, and in those situations, right, you're just in like crisis mode. There's a crisis, you've got to do something about it, your adrenaline kicks in, and you're just like, I'm going to do what I've got to do to fix this situation. And it's very hard in those situations to use your faith because you're often not thinking about faith. In those situations, you're just thinking, oh no, people are going to die. We've got to do something, right? Now, maybe you've been in a scary situation at some point. A similar thing like that happened with you. And in those situations, it was hard to think about your faith and to use your faith. But maybe even if you haven't been in a scary situation like that, we've all had storms of life, right? Life throws storms at us, yeah? We've all had certain storms in our life. There might be money problem storms or bad neighbor problem storms, which is very common in Roehampton, yeah? Or they could be ill health storms or a bereavement or loss storm where suddenly we've lost someone important to us in our life. Life's always throwing storms at us, and when these big waves come crashing over the boat of our lives, it can be really hard to use our faith. Now, you might be thinking, what does that mean, use our faith? Well, I will come on to that later. It will become a bit clearer in the story. Let's see what happens. Verse 38. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. So what's Jesus doing? He's sleeping, right? The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" What do they think about Jesus right now? They think that he doesn't care, right? Now, before they got on the boat and before this storm, do you think they would have thought that Jesus didn't care about them? No, I think they would have thought Jesus was incredibly caring. Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who's been preaching for a long time, and then's oh, I'm worried about the crowds. They haven't eaten for ages. They might faint or something. Let's get them some food. They would have seen Jesus as a very caring man. He's incredibly caring. But because of the storm, now they're questioning whether Jesus really cares about them. I don't know if that's ever happened to you. There's a storm in life. One of life's storms comes at you, and you start to question, does Jesus really care? I had a problem a few years ago, which is a really small problem compared to a lot of problems that you guys have faced and that. But what it was we were planning to buy our house, and God seemed to be opening all the doors for us to buy our house. And you know, our house was much bigger than anything we thought we could afford, and we were like, wow, God's really opening the doors. He's being so good to us. And then one day we got told, no, we're not giving you a mortgage. And I'm like, oh, we're all ready to, we've got a buyer lined up and we're selling our flat. We got someone to buy that. We're all lined up for everything. It was a few weeks before we thought we were going to complete. And I say to the bank, what do you mean? How much will you lend us then? And they said, nothing. I'm like, what do you mean nothing? They said, you're too high risk. We won't lend you anything at all. And I'm like, I've gone from borrowing a lot of money from the bank to buy a house to then nothing. And I remember praying about it, and I was really confused. And I was like, God, I just don't understand. It seemed like you were opening all these doors for us, and then you knew the door was going to shut. I don't understand. And I had this feeling inside maybe God doesn't care about me. And it was I knew in my brain that wasn't true, but in my heart I felt maybe God doesn't care. Why would he do this? And that's what happens when we have problems in life, when we have troubles in life. We could get tempted to think, does God really care about me? And that's what's happening with the disciples here, because they say to him, verse 38, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Look what Jesus does, verse 39. He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. Wow. That is hardcore, right? That is hardcore, right? How many words does Jesus use there? There's just 3 words in English, right? Quiet, be still. I mean, that's pretty serious, right? He just says a few words, and then it says, then the wind died down and it was completely calm. So you've gone from waves going over the boat to completely calm. You know, sometimes you see a bit of water where it's completely calm and you think, oh, I want to take a photo of that. That looks so peaceful and beautiful. That's what Jesus has done to this situation. It's gone from storm to completely calm, and he just did it with a few words. I find that a little bit scary. I grew up in Roehampton when, before pit bulls were fashionable, it was all about Alsatian dogs, or if you're American, German shepherds, right? And like loads of people had these big Alsatian dogs, and they seemed really scary. And you'd have loads of people that, like, I remember there was one guy in a block opposite from ours. He had this dog called Sabre, and Sabre was vicious. Why'd you call your dog Sabre? See, you remember Sabre. And Sabre's owner would always be like, come here, Sabre, put that down. Come here, Sabre. You know, and you're like, oh my goodness, like Sabre just doesn't listen to him. Like, it's like, if Sabre don't listen to his owner, then what can you do? And I'd be well scared every time I saw Sabre. You know, I was just like 7 years old. And this owner would have to use so many words to try and control its dog. And I remember another lady one time, her dog went after me, and the lady just kept shouting, come here, come back, stop it, leave him alone, you know, and all that. You know, using so many words, and the dog wouldn't listen. And you had this sense of, man, these guys aren't in control. You know, and eventually maybe they control their dog. You know, you get those dog owners that spend ages trying to get their dog back on the leash. And then they say to you, oh, don't worry, he's harmless, you know. And you're like, how do you know? He doesn't even listen to you. He can do whatever he wants. He's taking you for a walk. Well, Jesus is like the opposite end of the spectrum to this. Jesus just says a few words to the storm. Quiet, be still. Boom, it happens. That is power. That is how much power Jesus has got. It's like I knew a guy once. Actually, I probably shouldn't say his name. But basically, he's quite a serious guy, been in prison for a long time. He'd murdered someone. And I remember I was chatting to him about one time, and like loads of people thought he was well-hard. And like he had a time once where someone went behind him and hit him on the head with a bottle. And he turned around and said, scram, you know, or something like that, or you better run out of here. And they ran off petrified, you know. Like, and I was chatting to him, and he was like, no, he was like, the guys you want to be scared of are the guys that they don't get in any fights. They just pick up the phone and they say, I want you to sort out so-and-so for me. And just put the phone down. Like he said, those are the guys to be scared of. Those are the guys with real power. And same way, Jesus here is the guy with real power. He just says a few words and boom, it changes just like that. This is a powerful guy, which shows us there's no storm that Jesus can't stop, and there's no problem in our lives that Jesus can't stop. He has the power. And it's not the case that, you know, when we've got a problem, sometimes we feel like I've got to pray a lot. Like sometimes we think, if I get on my knees now and pray, then it's going to be a real powerful prayer. Or if I pray for longer than I normally pray, it's going to be real powerful. If I keep praying every day, it's going to be more powerful. And then maybe something will happen. And we kind of have this sense that the way God works is sort of like one of those dynamo torches where you've got to like wind it up for a bit before the light comes out. Whereas actually, the way Jesus is, Jesus just says, quiet, be still, and boom, it's finished. Now, that doesn't mean he doesn't want us to keep on praying without ceasing, because there's plenty of Bible teaching to show us that. But the point I want to get across is that the problems we go through in life, Jesus has the power to just, like as if he was clicking his fingers, to make it happen, to make it go away, all the problems that you're going through. Doesn't always happen, and we'll come on to that in a minute. Let's look at verse 40. He said to his disciples, why are you so, and what does he say? Afraid. He says, why are you so afraid? And then he says, do you still have no faith? Okay, there's two interesting things there. He's talking about fear, and he's talking about what? Faith. So there's a link between these two. The question he asks them is, why are you so afraid? So the question is why? Why are the disciples afraid? Well, they're afraid that they're going to drown, for one thing, right? And that shows how bad the storm was, because these were fishermen, so they were used to bad weather, but this was obviously exceptionally bad. They're afraid they're going to die. It would appear as well that they're afraid that Jesus doesn't care about them. And that is a very scary thought. I don't know if you've ever had that thought. Maybe God doesn't care about me. It's a very scary thought. I get it from time to time, and then I think, If he doesn't care about me, what's going to happen on Judgment Day? You know, maybe he doesn't care about me and I will go to hell. You know, it's scary to think that maybe he doesn't care about you. Scary to think about problems in life. I tend to have a mentality that so many things have gone wrong in my life that I just expect, something's going to go wrong soon. If something hasn't gone wrong for a while, I'm thinking, something must be coming up soon. And unfortunately, my job is a job that you ask any pastor, it's a job that you are guaranteed problems. So whenever there's not a problem, I'm thinking, how long is it till I've got to deal with some problem? You know, it's just guaranteed. And there's a certain fear that comes from that. There's also been times where I've been crying out to God to help me with a problem, and it doesn't look like he's helped me. At least he hasn't helped me the way I expected him to help me. And there's a fear that comes from that, because then I think maybe he doesn't care. Maybe he doesn't care. So what is the answer to this? Well, Jesus gives us the answer really, because he says, why are you so afraid? Do you still have no what? Faith. So he shows there's a link between being afraid and having faith. In a sense, it's like he's saying, if you had faith, you wouldn't be so afraid. If you had faith, you wouldn't be so afraid. Okay, well, what does that mean? How can we use our faith through the storms of life? Well, I'm going to give you 3 things that I think we see in this passage. How we can use our faith through the problems that we go through in life. The first one is to have faith, to have belief, to trust that Jesus cares. I think that's the first thing. That's the first way we can use our faith in life's problems, is to trust Jesus does care. He really does care right now. Just because bad things happen to us doesn't mean that Jesus doesn't care. It's really important to get that. When bad things happen to you, it isn't a sign that Jesus doesn't care. Please turn with me to Romans chapter 8. Romans chapter 8. And whilst you turn there, I'd just like to quickly point out, Father God watched Jesus, his son, die on the cross. That doesn't mean that God the Father doesn't care about his son. But because we can see that God the Father would let something bad happen to his son, but he still cares about him, that can help us see as well that when we go through suffering and difficulties, it doesn't mean God doesn't care about us. Romans 8, verse 28 says this, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. So right there, notice it doesn't say in the good times, God works for the good of those who love him. What does it say? It says in all things. So that means in the good times and the bad times. In all these situations, the good times and the bad times, God works for the good of those who love him. You think, well, how is that? Well, it tells us. It then says, for those God foreknew, that's the people he's chosen, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his son. So what's that saying is, it's all part of God's plan to make us more like Jesus. When we go through troubles in life, God uses it to make us more like Jesus. Jesus went through a lot of troubles in life, right? And when we go through troubles, we're sharing in Jesus' sufferings and we're becoming more like Jesus. I saw a film recently where there's a guy, he's like some sort of like special forces guy, and this other guy like wants to be trained by him and everything. And he's like, yeah, I can work with you. He's like, I've been around, I've seen some stuff. And the guy looks at him and says, no, you ain't. And basically what he's getting at is, you're nothing like me. You haven't been through all the situations I've been through. But then what he does is he takes the guy under his wing and he trains him so that that guy starts to go through the same situations as him. And as you can imagine, it gets a bit messy, and there's blood, and there's sweat. In a similar way, we're not very much like Jesus. And Jesus takes us under our wing and he says, I'm going to bring you through experiences similar to what I've been through, and it's going to make you more like me. And then you might say, well, who wants to be more like Jesus? I'd rather not have the suffering, thank you very much. But look at the next bit in Romans 8. It then says, for those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, so that he might be the firstborn among many what? Brothers and sisters. So the reason why he's making us more like Jesus is so that we can be Jesus' brothers and sisters, so that we actually start looking like him, yeah? So that we actually look like him. And so it's not like, you see those comedy movies. There was some comedy movie, I can't remember. I don't know if I just saw the trailer or something, where you got an African-American family and then there's like one white kid there, and the kid's constantly having to say, these are my brothers. And people are like, no, they ain't. And it's like, he doesn't look like he's part of the family, And God doesn't want it to be like that with us. The idea is that for all eternity, we'll be living with Jesus as his brothers and sisters, and we will really be like him. But there's a process that we go through of molding us to be more like him, and it involves suffering, because that's what Jesus did. He went through suffering, and we have to go through suffering to be more like him. So troubles in life make us more like Jesus, and one of the ways we can use our faith is to trust that he still cares. Listen, whatever troubles you've been facing lately, they're not a sign that he doesn't care. They're a sign that he does care. He cares about you so much that he's letting you go through this experience because it's going to bring about good change in your life. It'll be hard to see that right now, but in the future, you'll be able to look back and be like, yeah. I often imagine, last week at the fun day, I showed you that picture of a place I imagine in the new heavens and new earth, sitting with Jesus, chilling. And I also imagine in those times looking over things in my life and being like, you did that for that, didn't you? Yeah, good call. And just understanding all the troubles in life and being like, I see now. I understand what you were doing. It was for my good. Okay, I said I'd give you three things. I've given you one, right? Another one is to have faith that Jesus is with us in the storm. That Jesus is with us in the storm. Because in this story, the disciples are in the boat, in the storm, and where is Jesus? In the boat with the disciples. He's there in the thick of it, right there with them. And so one of the ways we can use our faith in troubles is to realize Jesus is with us. He's in the boat with us. Whatever we're going through right now, he is there with us. And if we believe in Jesus, that means we are united to Christ by faith. We're united to him, which means that when we're going through troubles, he is going through troubles. Now, I know that can sound crazy, like, what? Are you sure? Is that really true? Is that biblical? Check out Acts chapter 9. Acts chapter 9, you've got the story of Paul, who ended up being a famous apostle. But at this point in the story, he's not a famous apostle, right? He's a strict religious Jew who's going around having Christians locked up and killed, okay? Right? Doesn't like Christians at all. In Acts 9, verse 1, it says, meanwhile, Saul... he's got two names. He's got Paul and Saul. It's about having a Hebrew name and a Greek name. Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. He went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus, that if he found any there who belonged to the way, whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. So even women, As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute? And then what does it say? Me. Who are you, Lord? Saul asked. I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting, he replied. Right. According to the story, who has Paul just been persecuting? Jesus. And until Jesus tells him that, reading the story, who do we think he's been persecuting? Christians. And then when Jesus turns up in this amazing flash of light, He doesn't say, Saul, why are you persecuting Christians? And he doesn't say, Saul, why are you persecuting the church? He says, why are you persecuting me? All those Christians that were being locked up and the Christians that were being killed, like Stephen, if you know the story, Jesus was being persecuted in that. The Christians right now are being persecuted around the world for their faith. Pastors who are being beheaded, pastors who are being locked in prison. Jesus is being persecuted. Jesus is in the boat with them. Jesus is there when the pastor's getting his head chopped off, and Jesus is suffering. Jesus is there with the family who are mourning over the fact that their husband and father has just been killed by extremists because he's a Christian. And Jesus is there with them in the boat, and he is mourning with them. It says in the Bible to mourn with those who mourn. Obviously, the person who does that best is Jesus. He's there with us in the boat, which means one of the ways we can use our faith when we go through life's troubles is to realize Jesus is with me. He's the kind of guy who's in the boat. You know, when we had a baptism the other week, someone said to me, they said, was the water warm or something? And I was like, yeah. And someone else said, he didn't even get in the water, And it's like, yeah, standard, man. My days of getting in the water are over, I like to delegate other people to do it, There's other reasons for that. But it is quite nice sometimes not getting all wet and cold afterwards. But it's also nice going down into the water. But, there's some people that they never like to get their hands dirty. There's some people you're like, they're not going to help me with this. They never like to get their hands dirty. Jesus isn't that kind of guy. Jesus is the kind of guy who gets in the boat with us. That's what he did, isn't it? He came down to earth, came down to Nazareth, came down to a manger, a filthy manger, with cows mooing. I know it looks nice in the Christmas cards, but it wouldn't be nice. I can tell you, I've had 4 kids, and when you're in the hospital, you want it to be nice and clean. And your wife also really likes it if she can get a bed to herself, not one in the room with loads of other people there and other people making noises. But my wife's never had to deal with a cow mooing next to her or anything like that. That's just crazy. But that's the kind of guy Jesus is. He's like, I'm going to show you how I'm willing to get my hands dirty. I'm going to come down and get down in the grime with you lot. And I'm going to be the guy in the boat with you lot. That's the kind of guy he is. So we can have faith that he's with us. Okay. The third thing, I said I give you 3 things. The third thing to have faith about is that Jesus can stop the storm. And how many words can he stop it with? 3 words. He can just stop it just like that. He can stop it. So we can have faith that Jesus can stop the storm. Now, this is hard to admit. This is hard for us Christians to admit, but when we go through life's troubles, we can get really tempted to doubt that Jesus can really stop our trouble, okay? It can be hard to admit this, but this is some of the ways I've discovered to find out if I really am deep down not trusting that Jesus can stop problems, yeah? Okay, here's one way. If we depend on ourselves to fix our problems, that can be a sign that deep down we don't trust Jesus will fix our problem. When there's suddenly some problem and you're like, right, I've got to fix this. And you kind of panic and you do everything you can to fix that problem, but you haven't even prayed to God about it or anything like that. And you kind of feel like it's down to me to fix this right now. That can be a sign that we don't really believe Jesus can stop the storm. That we actually think, I've got to stop the storm. Another way we can see this is if you ask yourself, how much time do you spend praying each week? Now, I know what I'm like. I'm the kind of guy that when I wake up, I like to start work straight away. Like I wake up and I think, I get to work, right? And for me, I have to be like, I've got to spend time with God first. Deep down, obviously, there's something going on where I'm kind of thinking there's too much work to be spending time praying. How can I do all my work if I'm spending time praying? Well, what does that show? That shows that I'm thinking, Jesus can't stop all the storms in life, but I can. If I work really hard, work enough hours, I will stop the storms in life instead of trusting Jesus. There's another way another sign that sometimes we're not trusting Jesus will stop the storm, and that's when we depend on other people too much. And we should depend on other people, but sometimes we really count on someone else to fix the problems we're going through instead of ultimately depending on Jesus. That can be a sign where we're thinking, if only this person will do this thing for me, then I'll be okay. Instead of realizing, actually, we're totally dependent on Jesus. And there's another way, and I think this is really common in Roehampton. If we run away from life's storms, if we run away from the problems in life, that can be a sign that we don't really trust that Jesus can stop those problems. Because instead we think, I must run away from it because Jesus is never gonna stop it. So there's ways that we can lack faith when we're going through life's troubles. A bit like how the disciples were in the boat and they're thinking they're going to drown. And what we learn from this story is we can have faith that Jesus can stop any of life's problems just like that. Now, what about if he doesn't stop them, though? What about that? You might be thinking, well, plenty of times where I thought, yeah, you'll stop it, and he never did. Well, check it out. Please turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 12. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. So this is, Saul became a Christian after that bright light. And God ended up giving him this amazing experience of heaven. He was actually told he couldn't tell anyone about it. A lot of people, when they say they've had some amazing experience of heaven or something, they write a book about it and go on YouTube and everything and get famous and all that. That didn't happen with Paul. In fact, what happened with Paul is, he says here, 2 Corinthians 12, verse 7, he says, because of these surpassing great revelations, he says, therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. So, because he had this amazing experience of heaven where he was taken up to heaven and saw amazing things, so that he wouldn't then become really proud, like, oh, I'm the man, yeah. I'll start a new ministry called Third Heaven Ministries, And so that wouldn't happen, he gets this thorn in the side, a messenger of Satan. We don't know what it is. Some people think there's something wrong with his eyes. Some people think there's a problem with his health. There's all kinds of theories people have come up with. It's left vague, and that's really helpful because that means we don't know what it is, but we can all identify with it because we've all had things in life that feel like a thorn in our side, like, And it says here, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. So here, he's having faith that Jesus can stop the storm. Yeah? 3 times he's pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. Which is obviously not what Paul wanted to hear, right? He's like, I want you to stop the storm. But God says to him, my grace is enough for you. I will give you the grace, which in this context, grace means different things in different contexts. But here it means, I think, special assistance. God's saying, I'll give you the special assistance that you need. The Puritans would actually call it is special assistance. I don't know if having the E at the beginning makes it any more meaningful, but I like that. It's special assistance. So God's saying, I will give you special assistance to get through this. I'm going to help you get through this. And that's enough, rather than taking the thorn away. And he says, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And then Paul says, therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. So in this case, the storm doesn't get stopped, but it's so that Christ's power will rest on Paul. So Paul's like, I'm going to be more powerful as a result of this. That's why he didn't stop the storm. So that means we can have faith that Jesus will stop the storm. But in that faith, we recognize if he doesn't stop the storm, he's going to give me grace. He's going to give me special assistance. He's going to give me his power. His power is going to rest on me to get me through this. So, last night, my knees kept dislocating and my wrist and all my finger joints kept dislocating. I couldn't get to sleep. I was just in too much pain. I was trying to get to sleep. Suddenly my knee dislocates. Try to go back to sleep, my wrist dislocates. So I'm just lying in bed in agony, right? And I start thinking, okay, first off, have faith that Jesus cares. I was thinking, Jesus really cares about this right now. He's not like, so what, Duncan? You know, what's that saying they say in America? Rub some dirt on it. Rub some dirt on it. You know, he's not like that. He really cares. He's like, oh, man. He really cares. So I was having faith that Jesus really cared about my situation. It's not that bad a situation compared to what a lot of God's children are crying out to him about. But it was significant for me. Second thing I had faith about was the fact that Jesus was there in the boat with me, realizing Jesus is here right now. My pain is his pain. It saddens him that I'm going through this pain right now. It saddens him. And he's with me right now. And it's very comforting to know that he was with me. And then the third thing was having faith, Jesus can stop this right now. And I prayed to him. I said, Jesus, please stop it right now. Nothing happened. And I prayed again, please stop it right now. Nothing happened. I didn't pray a third time like Paul did. And I was just like, okay, it's not stopping right now. Maybe it is stop it later. I'm like, but I've got faith that he can stop it if he wants to. And the fact that he hasn't stopped it means he's using this to do something in my life. Sorry, that was my wrist. He's using it to do something in my life. And I don't know what that is. I don't know what it is. But it's something. And one day I'm going to sit in that nice spot in the new heavens and the new earth with Jesus, chilling. And I'll be like, that's what it was. So I did that. And then I thought, I'll listen to some Donny Hathaway. And I listened to him singing, the next song that came on was, You've Got a Friend. I was listening to it. I was thinking, I do have a friend. I've got the best friend. I've got Jesus. And he's here with me, and he cares. And he can stop at any point. But for some reason, he's decided right now that he's not going to stop it. He's got a good purpose for it. Now, back to the story. We look at the last verse. Mark chapter 4, verse 41. Let's look how these disciples respond. Remember, Jesus has just said 3 words, just like, quiet, be still, and boom, it just totally goes quiet. I just can't get over that. It says they were terrified, quite rightly so, and asked each other, who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. Okay, so this is quite astounding. Like, okay, we've probably all been in the situation where someone says they got a headache, someone says, I'll pray for you, and they say, is your headache gone? And the person says, yeah, it's gone. And we're like, wow, that is great. But we're also like, I wonder if it's really gone. And then we're also like, well, a headache can just go anyway, There's some times where you're like, you know what, maybe Jesus just did a miracle, a healing. Maybe he didn't, yeah. But when you see the wind and the waves suddenly just go completely calm, I'm trying to not move my arm so much this time, then you know, wow, this is serious. And these guys are terrified. So who is this man? He's obviously not just a human, right? He's obviously not just a good teacher or a wise man. He's not just someone who can give you good advice when you're going through one of life's troubles. This is someone who can actually totally stop life's storms, and he can stop real storms, which made me question, what is my view of Jesus? What is your view of Jesus? Sometimes we can relegate Jesus to a life coach. Yeah, like he's the guy who tells us how to live life, and forget that he's actually the guy who can stop life's storms. Whatever problem you're going through right now, he's the guy who can stop it. Sometimes we don't go to him enough and say, Jesus, will you stop this problem right now? I'm struggling. Will you intervene and stop it? Sometimes we try to fix problems ourselves instead of realizing he is the great fixer. Okay, now here's the other astounding thing. Jews didn't really like water too much. They didn't really like water too much. They weren't really people that would go on the water that much. And in the Bible, the water is sometimes used as symbolism for chaos, right? And if you can turn to the last passage we look at, please, Psalm 29. Psalm 29, you got this wonderful picture about water, because obviously there was the flood, right? The flood with Noah. And that would have been a terribly chaotic time. It would have been petrifying, right? And in Psalm 29, verse 10, it says, "The Lord sits enthroned over the flood. The Lord is enthroned as king forever." What that's saying there is it's saying picture chaos, picture the flood and all that chaos, all those waters going crazy. The Lord is seated on his throne above those waves. He's in control of it. Even though it seems like a crazy wave, he's the one in control of it. He's the one who's actually saying that wave is going to go this high and not a millimeter higher. Yeah? He's even more precise than that. I mean, if you think about it, God is the guy who invented millimeters, really. But he can do measurements even more precise, down to a whatever the measurement is. So, God decides that wave ain't going an inch higher than that. God decides that, right? He's totally in control, which means whatever chaos is going on in your life right now, whatever madness is going on right now, God is in charge of it. He's totally in charge of it. And if it seems like it's getting too much for you, it's not actually too much for you. It's just the amount that God has decided that with his grace, you can get through it, but only with his grace, not on your own. Now, we see this throughout the Bible, right? First, you see it with the flood, right? There's a flood, and God gets Noah in the what? In the ark, keeps him nice and safe, saves him through that flood, right? Keeps him nice and safe that whole time, Noah and his whole family, right? Also, years later, you see a similar thing going on in Canaan. In Canaan, there was a famine, and it looked like God's people would just die of starvation. And round about the same time, you got one of God's people, Joseph, who gets beaten up and sold into slavery and then ends up in prison. And yet we see that when Joseph was in prison, God was with him. And God was actually with him and doing something special and keeping him safe through that whole situation that resulted in Joseph becoming prime minister and sorting out the famine, saving millions of people's lives, and especially saving God's people who would have definitely died of starvation. God was with Joseph through that situation. He was the one who took care of the problem. He didn't stop the storms in Joseph's life immediately, but there came a point where he said, right, this particular storm of famine is going to be stopped. And then we understand how all those other mini storms all added up to stopping the big storm at the end. Years later, you see it with God's people with shadrach, meshach, and Abednego. Remember what they get thrown into? A fiery furnace. And they survived it. And when the outsider, was it the king, he looks and he's like, looks like there's another bloke in there with him, like a son of God. God was with them in the fiery furnace. Remember, Jesus is with us in the boat. And he preserved them. And then just a little while later, you had their mate, Daniel. Remember, he got thrown into something pretty bad. What was it? The lion's den. And God kept him safe through that and preserved him. But then there's a twist in the story, because you follow this theme through the Bible of God being with his people in the midst of their troubles, in life's storms, and him saving them. And then you get to Jesus. And Jesus goes to the cross to pay for the sins of his people. And whilst he's hanging there on the cross, there's a terrible darkness that comes down. And whereas God's people would always experience God being with them, Jesus didn't get to experience that, because the Father had to turn away his face because Jesus was carrying all of our filthy sin. God couldn't look at him because the sin was too disgusting. And Jesus ended up being separated from the Father for those moments. I don't know how long those moments were, but he was separated from the Father. And Jesus experienced being on his own, not having his Father with him, but being on his own. And he went through that so that we would never have to walk alone. He went through that isolation so that we could be forgiven of our sin, and that we could have the promise that God will never leave us or forsake us. No matter what storms we're going through in life, God is there with us. It's quite amazing. So how can we apply this teaching? Well, I've already explained as we went through how we can apply it for ourselves. Yeah, it's the three things. We have, anyone remember, we have faith that he cares. The second one was we have faith that he's with us, he's in the boat with us. And lastly, we have faith that he can stop it at any point. I'm glad you said that because I couldn't remember the third one. So now let's just finish by thinking, how can we help apply this with others? Because we've always got friends who are going through life storms, right? So how can we help them? Well, one thing is, let's assure them that Jesus cares. Because when our friends are going through life's troubles, they're going to get tempted to think that Jesus doesn't care. So we can reassure them that Jesus does care, that he does care about what they're going through right now. We can also, secondly, reassure them that Jesus is with them through these storms. That Jesus is with them. We might not be able to fix their problems for them, but we can remind them in a kind way, Jesus is with them. And lastly, we can remind them that Jesus can stop this storm. And maybe one of the best ways we can do this is by letting people know we're praying for them. And even saying, I'm praying for you. I'm praying that Jesus will stop this storm. You know, and if he's not going to stop it because he's got a better plan, then I'm praying that he'll give you the grace you need to get through this. Just reassuring people with faith, increasing their faith in Jesus. This is what this story, I think, is teaching us today, to have faith through life's troubles. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we thank you and praise you that you were separated from the Father on the cross so that we would never be separated from you. Thank you that we're always with you, that because of what you've done for us at the cross, we will never walk alone. No matter what we go through in life, you are there with us. We thank you and praise you. And we pray, Lord, that you'll increase our faith that you care for us. Increase our faith that you're always here with us and that you'll never leave us or forsake us. And increase our faith that you can stop any problem we're facing right now, and that if you don't stop it, there's a good reason for that. We thank you for your goodness, Lord God. Help us to have more faith and help us to help our brothers and sisters to have faith through hard times. In Jesus' name, amen.